From messing up a famous phone number to abandoning children, Ghostbusters Afterlife has left us with some burning questions that need to be answered.
It's a service I provide.
Ghostbusters Afterlife is a love letter to the spooky franchise that began all the way back in 1984. But the long-awaited sequel actually retcons lore in a big way. In the movie, we learn that there hasn't been a ghost sighting in over 30 years. That ain't true though. You see, back in the 1990s, there was this little show called Extreme Ghostbusters, and much like Afterlife, it centered around the torch being passed to some younger ghost hunters following the events of the first two films.
Why don't you let us handle it?
Yeah, teach us to be Ghostbusters.
With that in mind, is Afterlife telling us that Extreme Ghostbusters is no longer canon? That's a dang shame. It doesn't spoil Afterlife by any means, but Extreme Ghostbusters deserves more respect. But that was the 90s. Let's switch focus to the newest recruits. In Ghostbusters Afterlife, Phoebe discovers the original team's old phone number after watching their old ad on YouTube.
Don't wait another minute. Pick up your phone and call the professionals. Go Ghostbusters!
Naturally, she does what any kid would do and gives it a call. As luck would have it, Ray answers it and is convinced to pick up his proton pack for one last hurrah. Pretty simple storytelling, right? Not quite. It shouldn't be the same number. The Ghostbusters' original phone number was allocated to the team's old Firehouse. In Afterlife, however, Ray has returned to working in the occult bookstore that was introduced in Ghostbusters 2.
Magical paths to fortune and power?
Therefore, we can only assume that he figured out a way to reconfigure the old Firehouse phone number to reach the bookstore. But aren't phone numbers designated to specific area codes and buildings? How did he manage to set the Firehouse number up in his new location? The movie doesn't really explain it, but it's a fun Easter egg, and that's worth appreciating. Speaking of the Firehouse...
Excuse me, is this is the Ghostbusters office?
Yes, it is.
There's a scene in Afterlife in which Ray says the gang's old base of employment became a Starbucks. In the post-credits, however, we see Winston in their old base, and it doesn't look like much has changed. Where are all of the baristas serving pumpkin spice lattes and the hipsters writing their novels on MacBooks? Nowhere, that's where.
The architect was either a certified genius or an authentic wacko.
So why the heck was Ray talking about coffee shops? Was the line left in the script by accident? Or was Ray commenting on the gentrification of New York? Ghostbusters Afterlife is a smart movie, so let's just assume Ray was joking and talking about how the world has changed. The return of the Firehouse is good news though. Not only does it respect the franchise's past, but it lays the foundations for a big future. The post-credits tease Winston bankrolling a revamped Ghostbusters operation in New York, and that opens the door to more supernatural shenanigans down the line.
Is that a free-floating metal muncher? Definitely class 5.
But who's involved exactly? I mean, we don't see who's driving the Ecto-1, which raises a couple of interesting questions. Will the youngsters from Afterlife relocate to the Big Apple and keep busting spooks? Surely they'd have made an appearance in this scene if they were. Chances are it's going to be a completely different set of characters or the OGs. Heck, maybe the scene was included to give fans of the 1984 movies some much-needed closure and nothing more.
I'm gonna get you a nice fruit basket. I'm gonna miss him.
But let's not kid ourselves. Ghostbusters is a popular IP and we're guaranteed to see more sequels at some point.
For what purpose?
To go into business for ourselves.
Then again, Jason Reitman and the gang saw the post-credits scenes as an opportunity to screw with us across the board. The exchange between Peter and Dana is a prime example. On one hand, it's heartwarming as it basically confirms that the couple ended up together.
You want this body?
Is this a trick question?
That's all fans have ever wanted, as the pair's chemistry is undeniable.
I'll take Miss Barrett back to her apartment and check her out. I'll go check out Miss Barrett's apartment.
However, the beautiful sequence fails to address the elephant in the room. Is Peter the father of Dana's son? You know, the little rascal who got kidnapped by a supernatural nanny? Afterlife is keen to ignore the events of Ghostbusters 2. That being said, kids are a big deal regardless of which movie they were conceived in. What happened to the child in Ghostbusters 2? Who's his dad? Maybe he'll get his own spin-off someday and we'll learn all the juicy details. Still, Dana's kid is hardly the first child to be neglected in a Ghostbusters flick. That's right, we're talking about you, Egon.
I blame myself.
The biggest mystery surrounding the scientist in Afterlife is Cassie. You mean to tell us that he had a kid all this time and didn't mention it? She's in her 40s in Afterlife, meaning that Egon would have known about her existence during the timelines of the previous movies, video games, cartoons, and comic books. Yet she was ignored in all of them. That ain't right. But maybe Egon was just shy about being a dad because he didn't want to make the same mistakes as his own folks?
My parents didn't believe in toys.
Of course, it's easy to overlook Egon's bad parenting as soon as his ghost shows up to help his family and old friends kick Gozer's ancient ass. Still, you gotta wonder why it took him so long to materialize in spooky form. Granted, the most obvious reason is that the filmmakers wanted the likeness of the late, great Harold Ramis to have an emotional impact. And it certainly did. Good luck watching the film's epic climax without weeping like a big old baby. But what was the character's purpose for turning up at that specific moment? As is the case in a lot of ghost stories, the most obvious reason is that he couldn't move on until he'd wrapped up his unfinished business. Egon spent most of his adult life trying to stop Gozer from unleashing eldritch terror on the world again. So it does make sense that he'd play his part when it came time for Phoebe and the gang to save the day. Egon was a mixed bag as a family man, but at least he didn't abandon his hobbies. Take the secret underground lab in his farmhouse, for example. It's full of old junk from back in the day. In addition to his ghost-busting equipment and fungi, a half-eaten crunch bar can be spotted during a scene in which Phoebe rummages through his things. Do you think this was a recent crunch bar because Egon had a sweet tooth? Or was it the one Peter gave him back in the 1980s?
Egon, I'm going to take back some of the things I said about you. You've earned it.
Considering that Egon was what some people call a hoarder, it wouldn't be surprising if it was a 30-year-old chocolate bar. However, even though Afterlife is full of ghosts, apocalyptic entities, and the cutest little critters you're ever likely to see, Egon's lab is the biggest mystery of them all. The only way to access it is to slide down a fire pole, which is obviously a nod to the old Firehouse.
Wow, this place is great! When can we move in? You gotta try this pole!
That's cool and all, but how exactly do people get out of the lab? There aren't any stairs or elevators, so there might be a hidden door. Either that or people are forced to physically pull themselves back up the pole. Sorry peeps, but it's hard to comprehend an elderly Egon and any of his family members climbing up a pole. Egon knew what he was doing when he built his lab though. Everything was designed to set up the new Ghostbusters to deal with Gozer. But is the big bad gone for good?
I order you to cease any and all supernatural activity and return forthwith to your place of origin or to the nearest convenient parallel dimension.
The mineshaft in Afterlife was built by Ivo Shandor's cult to give the evil deity a route into the world. But there could be other portal points out there to accommodate Gozer's return. Afterlife confirms the possibility of the cultists still being out there, alive or otherwise. So the ancient menace certainly has minions. Plus, Gozer's prophecy foretells that the evil one can be summoned every 30 years. Afterlife certainly brings the franchise full circle, but that doesn't necessarily mean the end of Big G. If you want more content about spooky stories set in small towns, be sure to check out one of our Stranger Things videos. Thanks for being awesome.